And then we didn't even talk about the acronym ESG, which I think was part of the factor for how that happened. Sorry, I just hit my water bottle.
Welcome to Social Situation, a podcast where we chat with and celebrate leaders challenging the status quo and creating innovations in social impact. Join us for conversations around the current and future state of social impact, the value of closing the gap between for-profits and nonprofits, and the importance of taking values-informed risks in order to create the greatest impact.
I'm Trevor Loke.
And I'm Erin Mogel.
And this is Social Situation.
Trevor, welcome to Social Situation, episode 5. You talk a lot about trust and helping brands to build it. What do you think matters here?
I wish that when I was younger, I took trust as seriously as I do now because, I used to think trust was like, oh, well, if I mean or intend for something, that's good enough. And the reality is that trust is hard work. Like when you put something out into the world around, what you're going to do, you need to back that up. And I feel like we're in an age now where, we think about, trust is, won in drops and lost in buckets. And there's a lot of half full or empty buckets out there right now. I was reading a Gallup survey around Gen Z trust in institutions. And, I think a lot of tech companies and major brands were at, I think, a minus 84% approval rating around younger people. And so it's interesting because, I talked to, folks that are, in older age cohorts than me, and they talk sometimes, a lot of them will talk about, hey, we're really excited about future generations and that potential. But the problem remains that unless we can earn the trust of those future generations, we're going to lose a lot of the institutional memory and the impact that so many generations before us have built up. And, I think that we need to start thinking about how do we build that trust back and how do we help institutions that are doing good work earn that trust back. And that's something I'm thinking about a lot. I really, really believe that when it comes to thinking about antitrust, the only antidote to that is impact and making an impact, which is putting that work behind the intention and words that we put out there. So just coming full circle to, what I was saying, I'm trying to now to think about how am I going to act as opposed to what am I going to say? And that will guide the trust that I'm putting out into the world.
I love that. How am I going to act as opposed to what am I going to say? I think it really is about, walking the walk. And, I love how you said that, impact kind of is the only antidote. But I also, think that, we want to see companies showing up and doing impactful work, not just because there has been a lack of trust, but because they truly care about the impact that they want to make, not as a cover up, but as, a North Star. And yeah, I agree with you. There is a lot of, lack of trust these days, a lot of skepticism, a lot of gray area. So I think it just kind of puts the onus on us as impact leaders to continue to build and evolve trust and, kind of get people on board with us in a really meaningful way. We never want to force someone to trust what we're doing, but like you said, we want to show through our actions that we are trustworthy and that we are making a positive impact, and hopefully they'll, kind of jump on the bandwagon. So thank you so much, Trevor, for this enlightening conversation. It's really great to hear your perspectives. All right, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. Looking to make an impact, but not sure where to start? Elevate Social Impact, a purpose-driven consulting and coaching practice, helps companies develop their CSR strategies and embed a culture of giving back into their brand. And they guide individuals looking for fulfilling careers in social impact. Whether you're wanting to grow your company's give back efforts or find values alignment and make a greater difference through your work, Elevate Social Impact is excited to equip you with the knowledge, resources, and tools that you need to get started. Check out elevatesocialimpact.com today to learn more. Welcome to Social Situation. We are honored to have Mike Howard joining us today. Mike is the founder and principal consultant of Howard Impact and is an expert on all things sustainability and communications. Mike is also a fellow podcast host leading the Sustainability Communicator, and we are thrilled to dive into our conversation today. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me here today.
Thank you for joining us.
So, Mike, before we get into everything, actually, we were just chatting before we hit the record button. You kind of preempted this question around, how do we define sustainability and social impact and ESG and all these terms we're hearing today? I feel like that's a good place for us to start. So, how do you define those terms?
This is like the hardest question to answer. So start with the big one. I So it's interesting because I was thinking about this, like I think 5 or 6 years ago, people were definitely differentiating between sustainability and social impact. I think at one point, I think I had a title that was sustainability and social impact. It is part of it. It said both. But then I think over the years, sustainability started absorbing more of the S in like environmental, social, and governance. And then we don't even talk about the acronym ESG, which I think was part of the factor for how that happened. Sorry, I just hit my water bottle. Um, and I it's interesting. It depends on the company that you're working with. Some companies, they'll say sustainability is just environmental, and then they have like a social impact team. Others, it's both. Others don't even use sustainability, social impact. They might say social responsibility, corporate responsibility, which covers environmental. I remember I was working with a client, I guess it was probably like 4 years ago, and everyone there thought when we're doing like a board workshop to kind of help the company figure out their kind of pillars for sustainability. And when we started talking about like DE&I, they were like, "Wait, what? I thought this was just environmental." Like, because they were fine like talking about like climate and environmental goals because those are pretty easy to measure, but they were really uncomfortable with the concept of DEI because they weren't doing very well on that. And so even to them, they were clear on the difference. As far as like what I'm seeing at big companies, like you still see a separation where you might have kind of, even maybe duplicative effort sometimes, where you have like a team that's more like corporate philanthropy or like really handling like the community side of things, like community impact, and that would be under the social impact side. And then you might have the sustainability team or corporate sustainability team that is covering kind of the S in other ways. And then some companies now are just doing away completely with social impact as a function. It's just like ESG now. So I have heard too, like, some people who are social impact people losing their jobs because they're not ESG people. And so I think this kind of goes into the overarching trend of that this is a industry. I don't even like using the term industry because it's not an industry. This is a field that is constantly in flux. And I think this is what makes it confusing from a career development perspective, because there's so many ways you can plug into this. Like I have friends that are straight up environmental nerds. Like all they care about is greenhouse gas data. Like they have no interest or experience in community development, social impact projects. And so we're kind of bundling this all under one umbrella when they are very different. And I'm not saying there's one right way to do it, but I think the trend I'm seeing overall is that companies are kind of figuring this out as they go along. Um, and it really depends on the industry and really like what are their material impacts and like where can they have the most kind of bang for their buck where they invest their social environmental dollars.
That's really interesting. I work with folks that are looking to work in the social impact space, the broader social impact space, I should say. And I feel like what trips them up a lot of times, understandably, is the terminology and the speed or the rate at which the space is growing and evolving. So I appreciate you trying to, distill that for us. That's so helpful for our listeners as we, carry on in this sector. And of course, I know if we talked a couple months from now, things might look a little bit different, but that's also the exciting part too. And Mike, I know that you are a fellow business owner like Trevor and I, and we love hearing under other founders' origin stories. It's always very exciting and inspiring for us. So I'm wondering if you can take us back and share how you got started on your entrepreneurship journey. And I'm curious too if there were any aha moments that you kind of experienced along the way.
It's so funny hearing you call me a business owner because I don't think of that. I don't think of myself as a business owner, but you're right. I do have my own business. But I guess it's because it's just me. I don't think about it in the traditional term, but I was actually thinking about this the other day where, there used to be this idea that to be a true business owner, you had to have like a team of employees and things like that. And I've actually, I mean, maybe someday I'll have employees, but right now I really have no interest in that. And I kind of like just being my own person and being a solopreneur and then maybe partnering with other solopreneurs when it makes sense. But as far as my journey, this is something I've been wanting to do my whole life. Like when I was a kid, I actually like remember doing this. I was so annoying. I would go and rake my neighbor's leaves without being asked, and then be like, "All right, give me money." And I was like 7, so of course they gave me like $5. And so there's one business model: just do it, and then be cute and then they'll pay you. I don't know. Not as cute anymore, so it doesn't work. Um, but uh, but yeah, I'd say it comes from my kind of my family background too. Come from a family of small business owners. My grandfather started an auto repair business after World War II. He was in Patton's army, fixing the tanks and the Sherman tanks in the military, and then afterward he started an auto repair business, and then my father took that over. And so I kind of grew up around this idea of like kind of being your own boss, and I've always liked that.
Well, congratulations, Mike. I mean, that's an incredible journey you've been on, and your passion is so evident. I love the story of you raking leaves as a 7-year-old. I can just only imagine what those conversations were like when you went to your neighbors' homes to ask for the money that they weren't expecting to pay, but very entrepreneurial of you from a young age. And, definitely inspired by your entrepreneurship journey and what a great place to be in, that there are, lots of opportunities coming your way. Definitely a testament to you and the great work that you do and the great passion that you bring to all that you do and everyone you serve. And appreciate you sharing about your dad. I know that's obviously something very personal, and I've enjoyed following your journey. I think I shared with you as well. I unfortunately lost my dad to pancreatic cancer, and like your Kilimanjaro journey, I've been hiking the Adirondack 46 high peaks to raise funds and awareness. And so when I heard about your amazing Kilimanjaro journey, I was super intrigued and impressed and wanted to hear more. So I'm curious if you can share with our audience, what that has looked like for you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I know I'm sure you probably went through this with your father, and I'm so sorry to hear about that. Pancreatic cancer is a really tough one. But when someone that you love gets sick with something like cancer or something else, it really kind of brings you to your core of who you are. That comes out. And even with my dad, I'm sure it's the same with your dad. You didn't expect it to happen. Like you expect this to happen many years from now, or that you like. I remember thinking my dad's relatively young. He's only 60. He was 63 when he was diagnosed. And I remember in my head before he got sick, I was like, oh, I've got a good 10 years before I have to worry about health issues with my parents. And of course, that's not what happened. And I think what happened during that, especially the early phases where things are really uncertain, like you really want to feel like you're helping. At least that's how I am. I'm definitely like a doer. Like I'm not somebody who can just like sit around, and especially if something's out of my control, like I was actually talking to my partner about this the other day where like I can handle situations where like I feel like I can do something about it. Don't stress me out. But when it's something like nebulous or something that I have to wait or I can't control right away, I like lose my mind. And so, something like this, like, yeah, I mean, I can't cure cancer, but like, I felt like, okay, well, I can like raise money and I can like help the researchers that are going to find a cure for this. And so I think that was like the first thing that I jumped on. Like, I was like, all right, I can find ways to raise money for this organization that then, could create life-saving cancers, if not just for my dad, but for others. And so, did I say life-saving cancers? Life-saving cures. Don't edit that out. That's funny.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Mike. What an incredible journey you've been on. I'm sure your dad is so grateful for your support. I'm sure the whole myeloma, world community is grateful. And I love what you said about, your dad experiencing his lows and then the heights that you went to literally to support him. That's really impactful. And yeah, I know a lot of our audience can resonate and relate to what you've experienced. So thank you for sharing, and really glad your dad is doing all right. I've enjoyed following his journey via you on LinkedIn. So thank you for sharing that.
No problem. Yeah, it's just amazing difference a year makes. Like a year ago, he was learning how to walk again, and like he just like built a deck for me at my house. Like it's baffling. The body is incredibly resilient. It's an amazing thing. But yeah, it's been a reminder that not even that life, as everyone says life is brief, but I think we take for granted even that we're gonna all live to be 100. And that's not a depressing thought to me anymore. Actually, it's actually a beautiful thought. Like, every moment you have with somebody could be the last time you see them, so you should cherish it, like instead of like getting upset over petty stuff, like which we all do. It kind of it makes every day just seem so much like a more amazing. um so yeah.
bring this back to your role and how you're advising companies. I mean, you're seeing a lot of change on the ground. I mean, even just, the fundraising process and the way we connect with each other today is transformed, from, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. How are you staying at the forefront of how this ecosystem is constantly changing, and how are you helping companies navigate all of the changes that we're seeing in real time?
Yeah, I think this is something that people often ask me when they're looking for career advice. Like, how do you even like know how to like how do you stay on top of things? Like, how do you know everything? And first of all, I don't know everything, but like, how do you you study this in school, but like things change so fast. What you studied in school 2 years ago is outdated already. So like, what do you do? And my answer is, well, first, you got to let go of this concept that anybody knows everything because nobody does. Like, it's there's no like treasure chest of sustainability, social impact knowledge that someone just had like you accumulate. Like it's like I can't think of a better metaphor, but it's something that's constantly changing and you learn by doing it and by talking to other people. And like that's honestly where I learn the most is just like having conversations with people like you, other people that are out there doing the work. That's actually like my last role was really business development focused. So I was really just getting out there talking to people all the time. And I think I learned more from that than anything. Because it's stuff that's changing so fast that even if you read a book, like half the time by the time it gets published, it's like it's not as useful as it would have been if it was published immediately. Um, and so I'd say, yeah, for me, it's kind of connecting to people, talking to people, going to conferences sometimes, although not it's not possible for everyone to go to conferences. But I think LinkedIn, honestly, LinkedIn is just like the most amazing. Like I don't work for LinkedIn, but like I mean, that's why I know all you right through LinkedIn, and I think it's all. I actually tell people LinkedIn mixed with like what happened during the pandemic with this switch to kind of global work has like made solopreneurship, especially in sustainability, so much more possible. Like,
All the conversations you're in, what are you hearing in terms of where things are going in this space? I mean, there's a lot of conversations going on around where we want things to go, but what do you see actually happening?
yeah, I mean, I can speak of this from a corporate sustainability perspective. I know earlier we were kind of talking about the difference between social impact, and so I'm not talking about social impact as a profession, but more corporate sustainability, CSR. Um, I think we're heading towards where it's more highly regulated, which everyone saw last week. The SEC finally passed their rule for a climate disclosure, which actually is not that groundbreaking because most companies are already being governed by some European regulations that are going to require them to do this. So one of the, I guess you could call it either a negative or a positive, companies are getting so focused on reporting that they might be walking away from the actual program work. So like I have friends, for example, that have been laid off in the last year from sustainability roles, and they cannot they can only find reporting roles, and they're not reporting people. Like I do a lot of reporting. It's actually great for my business because like it's needed, but you can't just have reporting. You need to be doing the work. That being said, like I have seen it go both ways where company might not be doing much and then all of a sudden they have to report and they're like, oh man, we have to start doing something, so we're going to so they kind of go backwards where they start with the report in mind and then they go back and they're like, oh well, we're going to get sued for greenwashing if we don't actually do stuff. So it in a logical world it would be like you do the program, you do the work, and then you 3 years later report on it. It's never that clear cut. And I think I learned that just as in my business development role because it's never perfect. Like you can, like I said, you can read white papers and theories all day, but the real world's messy. And the way I view it is I don't really care if the company's doing it even just to look good, but as long as they're doing it substantially, like I don't like that's fine. If you're doing this for PR points, just as long as you're not greenwashing, wonderful.
So I know that you sit at the intersection of sustainability and communications, and that's a large focus of your podcast as well. And I'm curious if you can share with us the role that communications plays in advancing sustainability efforts for companies. Would love to hear more about kind of that intersection or that overlap.
Yeah, totally. So one of the reasons why I'm so attracted to communications as kind of a field in sustainability is that it's often overlooked as kind of like a soft science, but like we kind of have the technical knowledge. Like we really know what we need to do already. At least if we're just talking about like climate and environmental stuff, like that's not really the hard part. Like that's stuff that we pretty much know what we need to do. What we're not able to do is take collective action to actually do it.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Ultimately, there's two realities too. There's companies that are getting this right and are kind of doubling down on this, and there's companies, which is actually like the hardest job is like to get this right, like to do the work and realize like, wow, it's actually going to take a huge lift to figure this out in the first place. But once we can do that, like the return is incredible across the board, and it underlines everything our brand stands for. But in order to get there, it's kind of like, you know, using an analogy from earlier, it's like kind of like climbing a mountain themselves that they got to get to, right? And so for the companies that aren't doing that, it seems like those are the ones where the jobs are getting cut, the investments aren't going in. How do you convince companies to like go all the way and say like, look, it's worth doing the initial work up front to get your strategy and processes right? Because what's going to come down the line is way more beneficial than if you don't do that.
So I would say where I exist in the sustainability consulting, whatever you want to call it, ecosystem. I'm usually dealing with the companies that are already convinced. So like I don't need to do that. Or I'll get companies that are like, we want to like talk about this, we want to communicate this, but then I'll be like, all right, what do you have to communicate? And then they're like, oh, nothing. Then I'll be like, all right, like I have plenty of friends who you can hire to actually do that, to do the technical work and get there. So that actually, as a storyteller, I think that is some of the leverage I do have sometimes over companies, is because like the sustainability teams generally have way less well, their budgets are smaller and they have less pull internally than their marketing departments and their business development markets. So, increasingly you're seeing like especially tech companies, they're having salespeople that have to understand the ESG because they, in the RFP processes for their own clients, they have to say, okay, what's your net zero goal, this or that. So that's actually becoming a whole kind of career path now, is like training salespeople on how to talk about this stuff. And um, so, so I would say, yeah, I don't know. It's a battle that's fought like one. Oh, no, it's a war that's fought one battle at a time. Like every company's different.
Right, right. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I'm gaining so much from all that you just shared with us, from an point of being inspired, and also just reminded how important those small acts of kindness are. I know you said it was a small thing, giving that individual your seat at the doctor's office, but if we all did more of that every day, our world would be such a better place. And something that I've really taken away from our conversation today is your commitment to community in everything that you do, and your commitment to building connections with others, and knowing that, hey, we might not change the world on our own, but in community with others, we can make huge, huge impacts. And unfortunately, our time today is nearly going to end. But on that note, before we go, Mike, I'd love to hear. Here's another deep one for you. I'd love to hear what legacy you hope to leave in the sustainability space. So, when you look back on your career decades and decades from now, what impact do you hope to have made?
It's funny, like this is a question I've thought about a lot. I was sitting in the hospital with my dad a lot last year, and you do contemplate your own mortality a lot. And I mean, hopefully it's in decades and decades, but I don't know. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. Maybe it'll be next week. Like we don't know. And so I think like we all need to be thinking about like what will people be saying about us, as our eulogy. And I'd say like I generally pretty proud of what I've done with my life so far. Like there's definitely lots of things. I actually wrote about this. I just did a reflection that I posted on my blog about 1 year into my entrepreneurial journey. And like I don't think I would have that many regrets. I mean, yeah, there's definitely some things I haven't done yet. Like I haven't gotten married yet, I haven't had kids yet. Those are things that are probably, coming in the next few years. But like those are just more like actions. But like as far as like have I stayed true to my values throughout my life? Yeah, I generally have. I mean, I've made millions of mistakes. That's not saying I'm perfect, but I do think like if anything, my legacy would be that I hmm, I don't even know if I like stayed positive. A lot of people like tell me like what they like about me on LinkedIn, for example, is like my brand is authenticity. Um, and I definitely get that from my dad because I come from a blue collar background where it's like like I don't, there's just no bullshit. Like it definitely got me into trouble earlier in my career when like people expect you to fall in line. And now that I'm at that point where I can kind of, it's like it's considered a strength now. But but yeah, I think I kept it real. Maybe that's my legacy. Just kept it real. No bullshit, Mike.
I love that. That's, I think, the perfect place to end it for today. Mike, I want to just thank you again for spending the time with us, for being authentic, for being your true self. And yeah, like going deep with us on like a broad range of questions. I feel like we covered a lot, and it's really very much appreciated.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Mike Hauer is the founder and principal consultant of Hauer Impact, working with top brands like Mars on sustainability communications. Please consider checking out hauerimpact.com to learn more about Mike's work. Subscribe to the Sustainability Communicator, Mike's podcast, and connect with him on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. We'll be right back. $60 billion is being given by companies to nonprofits in 2024 to maximize regulatory benefits and manage reputation for employees and customers. Some companies are struggling. The rest are using Orgmatch because Orgmatch optimizes this process, saving time and money required in due diligence, research, and administration, while increasing confidence in the impact and investment earned. That's why community investment teams around the world are trusting Orgmatch to get the job done. Find out for yourself by going to orgmatch.com. That's orgmatch.com to get started now for free.
Welcome back. It's time for us to share what's on our mind. Trevor, what are you thinking about these days? Is it a prediction, a recommendation? Would love to hear.
Well, I'm thinking about trust and communication given the episode and the great conversation we've had with Mike. And there's a book that comes to mind that I would love to recommend to our audience called Trust and Inspire. It's by Stephen M.R. Covey. He has also written a book called The Speed of Trust. We talked about the speed of trust earlier. I think it's really topical around how do we build communities and organizations that have trust as a foundational underpinning for how that community is going to grow and flourish into the future. And so, when it comes to this book, Trust and Inspire, it's saying like, look, if we can start with trust right away and just know that this is something we want to build and we want to have, you can really systematize the work involved of showing that authenticity, that competence, and that caring that we talked about earlier. And I think that's something I would absolutely recommend people to check out. As we were saying, Erin, like I think part of trust is trusting to say, what do I say yes to? What do I say no to? And it's a really good book around, I think, clarifying where your boundaries are, which I think is a really important element for trust. If we're not able to know what our own limitations are, then we can't really be putting out the trust message we want to. And I think this book has really helped me think about what are my limitations as a leader so that I can show up honestly telling people this is what I can show up as and this is what I cannot show up as.
That's great, Trevor. You have me thinking because I feel like a lot of times when we think about trust, it's, do I trust others? Do they trust me? But you've brought up a great point about do we trust in ourselves, right? Especially, you and I talk a lot about running businesses and, businesses in the impact space. And, it's complex work and it's a journey every day. And I think there's so much to say for like, are we trusting in ourselves and are we confident in what we're saying and what we're doing? Are we confident in what we're saying no to or choosing not to do? So I appreciate that reminder about, kind of boundary setting too. Like, can we trust that what we're setting boundaries for is what we need boundaries for? Are we not trusting ourselves and maybe going ahead with something that we should have set a boundary for? So definitely all kind of great thoughts there. And I look forward to checking out the book. Thanks for the recommendation.
Well, thanks, Erin. Well, I want to know what's been happening with your thinking and like, do you have a prediction? Do you have a recommendation for us? What's on your mind today?
Yeah, I loved our conversation with Mike. He's such a great person and really inspired by his journey. And, I got to know Mike through a group that he started for solopreneurs, for consultants and coaches and fractional employees, all in the broader social impact and sustainability ESG space. And, it really got me thinking about the power of community building in the spaces that we're in, going about starting a business, especially when it's your first business, going about work in the impact space when the space is changing and shifting and evolving every day can be a crazy and wild and fulfilling journey, and have all the ups and downs. And what Mike has built for us, this group, we meet about once a month, and it's a great community where we ask questions and share ideas and wins and learn from one another and collaborate and share vulnerabilities and really just kind of connect and feel like we have that team culture when all of us are working individually. It's been really nice. And I really appreciate the community he's built. And it's really just gotten me thinking about what community building can do for us. I often use the word networking, but I'm really trying to shift my language to community building, because it's, networking can have a kind of transactional connotation, but community building in my mind is, focused on long lasting partnerships and relationships. And it goes both ways. And I mean, first of all, as we both know, there's no way to make an impact alone, right? We need to surround ourselves with other committed people that, have incredible skill sets and passion and drive and want to make that difference like we do, and that's how we affect change. But also from a business perspective, just surrounding ourselves with people who are our cheerleaders. There's so many times in our career where we might not feel like we are surrounded by those cheerleaders, or we might experience a toxic work environment, or we might have someone say something that was pushing us down as opposed to lifting us up. So finding communities of like-minded people, whether you are running a business or not, creating that community for yourself, even if you don't have LinkedIn connections, even if you don't feel like you have a professional network, there's no reason you can't go out and start building that for you. Like, what sort of spaces do you want to be in? Who do you want to surround yourself with? Who do you want to be your cheerleader? And really leaning on those communities, because they'll not only benefit you in your professional career, but those could be the change makers alongside you that are, working with you to affect change and affect, incredible impact, and are helping you with your own kind of personal mission in this space. So definitely recommend everyone seek out those communities, build them for yourself, and you'll see the immense rewards that you'll gain from, finding people who are in your corner that are like-minded.
I love all of these communities of impact-oriented people who are coming together, in all different parts of the globe, the communities I'm involved with, the ones you're involved with, the ones we're hearing about from the guests we have on the show. And it just reminds me that there are so many ways we can build community and show up in community for each other. And you don't have to be a social entrepreneur or having started a charity. I was talking to somebody this week who was telling me, they're a community investment professional at a company, and they're all alone, and they are constantly having to figure out, how do I navigate this entire workload of responsibility through my complex organization, my company that has a board of directors and a CEO that have all of these expectations and thoughts, many of which are not true, or not grounded in the realities of the work, right? And so I think there's all sorts of challenges we can come across no matter what we're doing, where, having people that we can bounce things off of, where we can get advice from, where we can ask, how did you solve a similar challenge, and have them give us a process or a playbook that they've used that's worked, or even one that hasn't worked, with like, hey, I don't know what to do, but I can tell you what doesn't work. That can be really helpful sometimes too. But at the end of the day, nobody that I've ever met has, truly been able to, quote unquote, pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, despite how we think about entrepreneurship or anybody that kind of goes off on their own. We're all the products of our communities, from the schools we go to, the roads we walk and drive on or cycle on, to just our health, the education systems, all the things that we take for granted. So I really, really am a strong believer in community, and it's something that everybody can find. And the only question is, where are your people?
Social Situation is co-hosted by me, Erin Mogel, the incredible Trevor Loke, and it's presented by Elevate Social Impact and Orgmatch. Editing is by Tristan Thomson. New episodes are released on the second Thursday of every month. Visit socialsituationpodcast.com to learn more or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.